transitioning towards a green economy at the same time, aiming to integrate more closely into the European and Atlantic area. Today's session aims to explore this journey, the journey that Ukraine is making in sustainable development in an Eastern European country. And we have two parts to our session today. The first is a 25-minute session with the Deputy Prime Minister. Then we will shuffle some chairs around and bring down a panel of speakers to talk about the implementation of policy on the journey to the green transition. So beginning with the opening session, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Olga Stefanishnia, approximately, who is Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you. Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, an international law graduate from Kiev, formerly Director General of the Government Office for Coordination of European and Euro-Atlantic integration in the Ukrainian cabinet. Over to you to speak for 8 minutes or so.
Thank you so much.
It's working. It's coming through the headphones.
Is that working?
People are saying it's coming through the headphones.
It's working. Oh, okay, sorry. Well, I don't think that really I need even like 8 minutes because we will still have a session of questions and answers. And I think that it would be much more fascinating than just delivering a speech, especially ahead of the upcoming statement from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will be the agenda setter basically today for the input of Ukraine into the general climate change processes and the input that could be brought from Ukraine, from Ukrainian perspective. I think that it is really important to begin from understanding that Ukraine is one of the biggest markets outside of EU in the European continent, basically setting the trends for the transformation of the whole region, which is outside of EU, including those neighboring countries. So, and this is the reality we're in. And basically, Ukraine has one of the largest trade agreements with the European Union since the history of the association agreements itself. So, and basically 5 years after this agreement has been signed, we have significantly advanced in a regulatory approximation. So the position of Ukraine is following. So we have no other way than to move further with approximation of the market rules to the European. But at this stage, it is really important for us that we could not only consume the policies, but also to form them. And this is basically a vital issue for us. And having said that, I mean that when it comes to the green transition, Ukraine has chosen from the very beginning the way of aligning the policies and participating in a policy process. That's why Ukraine's been one of the key countries who has launched the dialogue with European Union on the policy process, including the implementation of the European Green Deal. These dialogues are only existing with the US, Japan, China, and Ukraine. So it shows that the attention to Ukrainian market is strong. The voice of Ukraine is heard, but this is like part of the positive story. Now the complicated story is following, that we have agreed within the government that Ukrainian second nationally determined contribution on the Paris Agreement should be ambitious because, again, the logic that we want to be a policy setters, but not the policy consumers. And if we're not ambitious, we're outside of the box of those setting the agenda. And we spent almost a year in a very complicated and heavy discussions with Ukrainian industries and businesses who have to transform and form their next 10-year strategies for their development. And I think that the NDC we have adopted is a balanced political decision, which allows us to be here on the agenda. And it is already seen by the level of participation of Ukraine in the COP26. Ukrainian president is delivering remarks on the first day. Ukraine has been invited by basically most of the key stakeholders, top 10 countries, to join the initiatives like methane, like those related to forests, and those related to financial coordination, which wouldn't be possible if Ukraine wouldn't be treated as a player. But then the other part is that we have been very pragmatic in setting ambitions goal. Why? Because we made it conditional. And this would be part of the policy and the line we will be taking ahead of this COP26 is that we should cooperate and transfer of technologies in coordination of access to financial resources and coordinate in a policy processes. So, and the NDC we've adopted is conditional because we have we can reach this ambition only if Ukraine will be aligned with the European electricity market and will synchronize with ENTSO-E in 2023, if Ukrainian gas market will be sustainable and the gas market rules will be applicable to all players in a unified manner, which would serve as an instrument of predictability of our regulatory framework. Then we know that this ambition is only reachable if we would have access to not less than 10 billions of euros annually for the investments, both in private and state sector. And as well as we, of course, know that given that the vision is Ukraine 2030, we hope that by that time we will have deoccupied territories and Crimea brought back to Ukrainian territory. So, and this would be the best possible reason for reconsideration of our ambition, and hopefully this will take place. So, so the purpose of our delegation being here today is to advocate for these conditions and call for the cooperation and collaboration with the state partners, given the globality of challenge. And I think it's really important that on the sidelines of this COP26, everybody are talking about the access to financial resources. It really matters because these are the global initiatives. We see that many countries are going through a very protectionistic policies, trying to preserve the particular moment to grab some part of economy. But all of us understand that we should look a bit more advanced. And if every country would start playing its own game, we will not reach the common goal. So now when we have the framework Paris Agreement, when we have the ambitions NDCs, when we have the top 10 countries of the world has prioritized the climate policy in their governments, it is really time to think globally, how can we get really united over specific issues? Is the general coordination of financial framework, the platform for the transfer of technologies so that every country could share the technologies they are advancing in decarbonization, but also thinking about other areas which is not really being covered, not only the heavy industries, but for example, food production and localization of food productions and consumption. I think it's really, really important, and we will pay our attention, hopefully ahead of these 2 weeks to this issue, because Ukraine is the agrarian country. And if there's something we know better than all the rest, is something how to make deal in that area. So we're pretty positive in being here as a player and as a contributor, as ambitious country, being supported by Ukrainian business as a very pragmatic business, understanding that there's no other reality but to transform, but based on national interest, based on national context. And this is basically the logic we're putting into that.
Thank you very much for wonderful opening remarks. Now we're just going to have a bit of a question and answer session. And let's start off with the NDC. So you mentioned the reasons for the urgency of and the ambition behind the NDC. What really are the main goals, and how does the plans vary between industry and energy generation and agriculture? You mentioned all of those. So what are the meat? What's the meat of the NDC, and where are the constraints in making it even more ambitious versus where you are at the moment?
Well, to be frank, based on the calculations, and here we have the colleagues who have been calculating the NDC, unfortunately, given the Ukrainian context, this NDC is not very ambitious. Why? Because our industries has not been well developed. And the level of decarbonization we've reached by that time is not because we have been so green and so proactive in terms of decarbonization. It's because of the lack of vision and lack of investments into the industrial development and transition of the economy and development of the economy of the country itself. So this was the initial point that we have a starting point and we should preserve this dynamics, having in mind that we are very ambitious in terms of our market development, growing economy, and etc. So it is an investment in the next 10 years to preserve the dynamic the same, but based on the positive development of economy. So that's why we have put in all the sectors covered by NDC into this document: the agricultural policy, the industrial policy, different issues related to raw materials and etc., and transformation and investment into the alternative sources of energy, which is the core part of our national economic strategy until 2030, whereas it is provided that not less than 25% of all energy will be consumed through alternatives. So this is the ambitions we're here. Based on the NDC we've submitted to Paris Agreement, we've already started to develop a concrete plan of decarbonization in each and every sector of the economy. It will be a multi-stakeholder dialogue because this is the only instrument which brings credibility into the position of the government and which brings business, economy, and the government decisions together to make sure that they're really implemented. We hope that by the end of this year, we will have the vision on each and every sector. It's been presented, but the major goal here today is to mobilize the platform for the coordination of financial resources, because basically it's just been announced that EU and US has announced, let's say, 100 billions of investments into the decarbonization, but it is not a very big sum. We know the resources from which this sum will be mobilized, and still we do not have clarity how can Ukraine or countries like Ukraine access these resources in the timelines we have set out for ourselves, for those industries we have prioritized, and for those measures we see necessary. So as I'm leading the bilateral dialogue with the European Union, last time we met, we've agreed to establish the financial platform between European Union, Ukraine, and IFIs to coordinate our efforts to make sure that NDC is implemented and the necessary resources are allocated for that. So this would be the principal element of the discussions we will have here today. And based on that, we will then form the sectoral policies related to implementation of NDC based on the access to the resources we will have.
And are you cautiously optimistic?
Yes, I'm optimistic because there are money, and basically there is a natural problem in Ukraine that we have money, but we do not have the history, or let's say capacity, to utilize that. And basically this is part of my mandate to make sure it happens. So I'm rather positive, and especially positive knowing that this is the condition for implementation of NDC, which we have said there, and our principal international partners have already agreed to do it.
Thank you very much. So moving away from mitigation and the NDCs into the realm of adaptation. Now, obviously, the way that the climate is changing can impose direct hazards on Ukraine. So an agricultural drought, extreme heat, but it can also impose hazards through interrupting supply chains or whatever that cascade across borders. And we've certainly seen this in the European context of us leaving Brexit and supply chain disruptions and so on. As you're looking ahead and thinking about building a society and an economy that is resilient, what sorts of steps are you thinking of, and how are you actually going to manage that?
This is one of the issues we're putting our utmost attention into, because we understand that the steps I've been mentioning, taken individually by countries, could really affect severely the global structure of the economy, and especially the structure of the market within European Union, mostly in a direction of its destabilization. And for Ukraine, it is like twice as more severe, because we still only in the process of building this chains and building this access to a European or any other market. So we are putting a couple of goals in front of us to preserve the positive dynamic in terms of access for agricultural products and food products to a European market. And this has been a positive story for both of us, but also we want to launch a more global discussion in investing into the sustainability of this production by launching again initiatives related to increasing more consumption of the local products, preserving the chains. And I think that following the framework convention, we should think about the sectoral conventions and sectoral international agreements, which would put the framework for different sectors and how do we see the market in specific sectors developed in the continent, in the worldwide. This is the new agreement we need, and this is what we will be advocating here in COP, but for Ukraine in our bilateral dialogue with European Union, but also with US partners, but mostly also even in WTO, and the largest presence here also is ensured. We will advocate for the necessity to set the unified rules for all players to avoid any conflict or controversy in breaking through the chains. We have some ideas who I will not spoil, because some of them would probably be announced today ahead of the much higher presence than only mine. So, but we are putting the basis for this discussion for the next COP next year, and hopefully we will have the initiative which will launch and boost the global efforts in that regard.
Thank you very much. So in the last 2 or 3 minutes, my final question is around your relationship with the EU. How can the EU's Green Deal facilitate your transition, your green transition? And what are your expectations from European partners? So you've talked a little bit about the financial side, but beyond that
Well, I think the important element of that is that it depends on Ukraine itself, whether European Green Deal will facilitate green transition or make it much tougher or even impossible. My personal task is to ensure that we have the proper capacity to make sure that European Green Deal is really facilitating this process, which means that we should get integrated into the policy planning processes. We should lobby for our interests in different structures. We should have the positions on each and every initiatives which has been launched by European Green Deal, and we should be very much integrated into the internal elements of this process, as well as at the highest political level, at the level of the heads of states discussion. And this requires a proper capacity from Ukrainian side. Otherwise, we will then consume the policies, as I was saying. We will then mitigate the effects or negative even effects of these policies, like as if it could have been with the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Whereas in the beginning of this policy process, Ukraine had no word to say. And we basically heard the answer that you will simply have the tax and there's nothing you can do without that. But we have treated ourselves as partners. We used the association agreement. We launched the consultations, we preserved our arguments, we mobilized other international partners outside of the EU, and today we see that there is no radical position as regards Ukraine, because we're treated as the partner, as the FTA partner, as the energy community partner, and that really matters to us. But we really should expand this positive experience to all areas, and that really depends on us, how effective our business is in advocating, how effective our government is in hearing the business, balancing the policies and preserving its national interests, but also in how effective our advocation is. Otherwise, if it is not so, we understand that European Green Deal, the green transition, is not the one-day policy. It's not something related to political cycle, which would then change overnight with the new commission. This is the new reality the whole world is advancing in, and we should really stay at the same level. So, so my answer is that it depends on us.
And you're talking about us in terms of the political. You're talking about us in terms of the industry, but what about us in terms of the citizenry, the people? Are they fully behind what you would, are they where you would like them to be to give you the political mandate to drive this further and faster?
Well, generally, we made a number of surveys related to general policy, general prioritization of the environmental policy, and it is very much positively perceived by Ukrainian citizens and population. But still, we have to invest a lot into the culture of individual input of every citizen into this environmental policy. We're doing a lot in consultations with the business, with the stakeholders in terms of waste management, in terms of decarbonization, adaptation to the new reality of the green transition. But still, we're only in the beginning of the transformation related to the mindset of Ukrainian citizens when it comes to the, again, waste management, sorting of the garbage, and etc. This is the new reality, but the level of loyalty of people to that is rather high, I would say.
Thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been wonderful speaking to you, and have a good day. And I hope everything is successful for you this week. Thank you very much. We will now have a 5-minute changeover session, bring some more chairs on, bring the panel down. So just bear with us for a second, please. Okay, I think we are ready to go again. Can people hear me over the? Good, good. Well, welcome back, everybody. So the second period of this panel is around the implementation of the journey to a green transition, and we have got a wonderful panel of speakers that represent policy, industry, and think tanks. My colleague Anthony at the end as an energy transition expert. The way we're going to do this is that I'm effectively going to ask a question of each speaker. They're going to talk for 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes. Then we're going to go through the panel, and then we'll open up for question and answers for anybody in the room or anybody online towards the end, aiming to finish at 10:30. So I'll introduce the speakers one by one as I go through. So let me start in the far end, and the speakers are speaking in the order that they're sitting. Welcome very much to Irina Stavchuk, who's a Deputy Minister of Environment and Natural Resources, formerly Executive Director of the ENGO Eco Action. And my question to you, Irina, is, as we've just heard, NDC2 shows that Ukraine wants to play the ball on climate and tries to align its commitments with the EU Green Deal. What state policies, finance, carbon, pricing, regulation could make more profound difference in decarbonisation? So over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Tim. So first of all, I would like to say that over the last year, Ukraine has made a tremendous step in understanding of its climate policy and moving forward. We made calculations and modeling in all the different sectors of economy to understand where our priorities could be, how much it would cost, and to come to a political deal with business and civil society what our climate target should be. And that was approved in a much more ambitious NDC. Over the last year, we've also seen a very big change in the business society. So almost all the major companies also announced the climate neutrality targets by 2030, 2040, 2050, which has not been before. We are working hard on implementing and going forward with this target. So the government started to develop their concrete action plan to understand what are the actions and transformations which have to happen in each sector, how we will finance it, and how we will implement it. It's very much linked to what the government was already planning to do with European integration. So all the major European integration reforms which have to happen, they will also definitely and strongly contribute to real action on decarbonization. And we already made certain steps on waste management reform, its industrial pollution reform, and introduction of integrated permit system based on best available technologies. These are the issues of biodiversity protection, and that's also very much related to European integration and climate saving. So of course, approval and acceptance of all these necessary reforms will bring real actions. But it doesn't happen easily. It doesn't happen quickly. And there are lots of debates about each reform. And there are certain reasons to that. And these are the reasons of kind of different setup in Ukraine. We have huge problems with energy poverty. And every time we discuss certain carbon pricing, we find out that still customers and people don't always pay the full price for the energy, for electricity, and for heat. And adding up carbon price doesn't really help much. We have to first deal with this baseline problem. There is issue for business companies that we also hear often is that in Ukraine, the bank loans interest rates are much higher than in EU. So if we introduce the similar regulations, it doesn't mean that for our companies, it's same easy to move forward. So finance in all this discussion plays a very big role. And that's why we are seeking and Here, agreements on international carbon mechanisms. We are seeking for international cooperation. We are seeking and also trying to redefine our internal environmental finance system. And as a Minister of Environment, we initiated development of the Ukrainian Climate Fund with the idea that carbon taxes which are collected in Ukraine could go as concessional grant funds for climate projects in cooperation with IFIs, in cooperation with Ukrainian development banks, to be able to put much stronger emphasis on implementation of necessary transitions.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask a subsidiary question? You said about biodiversity.
Yes.
That's my background. I'm also a professor of ecology as well as a research director. So how is your thinking on biodiversity and what is that linkage to climate change?
There is a direct linkage on preservation of biodiversity and nature ecosystems. And it's a complex issue because when the agricultural sector in Ukraine has such a major role, and with the land reform, there is much more appetite to transfer the valuable ecosystems to the agriculture. That's where we have the problem, basically.
Thank you very much indeed. So moving on, the next speaker is Dmytro Los, who's chairman of the board of UBTA, the Ukrainian Business and Trade Association, which unites export-orientated industry with offices in Brussels and Kiev. Dmytro, over to you. Oh no, I've got to ask you a question. Sorry, I'm losing track of my strand. When you look at the more ambitious Ukrainian NDC2, so the one from July, from the perspective of industry, where do you see the main challenges in delivering on commitments, and what policies could play a role as a positive multiplier in the green transition?
Thank you for your question, actually. You know, the first thing I have to say that Ukrainian business is totally in line with Green Deal agenda, which was stated on June 2021 on meeting of G7 leaders. And yes, we are eager to reach decarbonization as soon as possible. Still, we need to remember that we are living in a quite complicated surrounding, remembering our war in East, annexation of Crimea, and some of the other issues. From other side, Ukrainian business is ready to develop programs together with government, sectoral programs which will help and show the roadmap of how to transform different sectors, joining again in one ambitious goal to reach decarbonization level stated in a national determined contribution. And regarding national determined contribution, I also have to say that Ukrainian business showed its ambition and its desire to find mutually beneficial solutions with the government, because actually there was quite hard fight with our government trying to find good solution, but now it's found, and now business and government together can move towards joint goal. Still, we have to remember that even now, Ukrainian business is living in quite complicated surrounding, just meeting financial problems which are not very common for businesses from other countries. For example, during our transformation system, during adopting the legislative base of Ukraine to European standards, we already have a lot of financial issues. And it's only the beginning of the way. We have the program developed till 2026. So that's the first and main problem which we find. Another one that we need to find maybe some kind of mechanism established by our government for internal financing. That is what Deputy Minister said already, which will be focused definitely on a green transformation, not on anything else. Still, to finally answer your question, my conclusion will be that without severe financial help from international institutions, including those from European Union, for Ukrainian business, it will be really hard to reach its ambitious goals to decarbonize. And actually here on this panel, we have two leaders which already started their complicated but necessary way towards this direction, DTEC and MHP.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to our next panelist, Maxim Timchenko, to my right, who is DTEC's CEO since 2005. That's Ukraine's leading energy company and private investment firm. Also member of the World Economic Forum's electricity governance community. Welcome, Maxim. DTEC has a mixed portfolio of carbon-generated energy and energy from renewable sources. Considering Ukraine's NDC2, what is the most viable strategy for companies like yours to advance a carbon-neutral agenda? What should be done to attract more FDI into green modernization?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great pleasure for us to be here. And I think it's a special event, not only for our company, but for the whole country, since Ukraine is represented at the highest level. And I think it's a good sign for everybody that now Green Deal and decarbonization is part of political agenda of the Ukrainian president. I think that Ukraine has unique opportunity to become leader of decarbonization in Eastern Europe. And with all ambitious goals we set, I have a very confident position that such goals can be achieved by combination of efforts of the government, society, and business. And for us, it's something special because 2 years ago, we announced about climate neutrality of the tech by 2040. In January 2020, we were the first who brought a Green Deal agenda to Green Deal to the agenda of our government, organizing roundtable in World Economic Forum. At the end of 2020, we publicly presented long-term strategy of the tech, where we announced different ambitious goals, including reaching not less than 33% in our generation mix by renewables. And for us, what is important is to lead by example. Talking about renewable sector, today we invested more than 1.5 billion euros into building new capacities in wind and solar. Being one of major coal producers in the country, we announced about our active development in just transition way to phase out coal. And during this year, we closed 2 coal mines out of 11, but again, in a responsible way, making sure that our people have another job and they're not left behind. I think that innovation is playing a crucial role in developing decarbonization agenda. And for us, not only development of renewable capacity, but also energy storage is part of the process. We built first industrial energy storage capacity in Ukraine during 2021. So all these examples is that corporate center not waiting for changes in government policy and not even in any favorable conditions try to lead this process. And in my strong opinion that the role of government now is to build framework for corporate center so that we understand that our further development of renewables is supported by the government. That development of new innovative technologies like hydrogen or small modular reactors as part of transition process is also supported and financed by Ukrainian government institution and by foreign institutions. So I think if we bring all these joint efforts into the process, then we can be quite confident that such ambitious goals can be achieved.
Thank you very much. Moving on to my left-hand side now is Alexander Dombrovsky, Vice President of MHP and President of MHP Eco Energy and Chairman of the Board of Public Union Global 100% RE Ukraine. MHP is an agro and industrial holding, the largest producer and exporter of chicken in Ukraine, I understand. So my question to you, in view of the upcoming climate impacts, including on the productivity of yields, how can Ukraine build a climate smart, resilient economy in the agricultural sector? Do you see more risks or opportunities?
Thank you very much for this question. I would like to say that I'm particularly pleased to see so many Ukrainian friends here, such a powerful team in such an important place, where indeed we are taking massive decisions, huge responsibility. And by the way, we see the opportunity and our challenge in actually feeding the world. And that's one of the largest missions for our country. Ukraine is a high-tech agro-industrial country. And perhaps if you could show the second slide, I'll stand up so that I could demonstrate.
I will illustrate the company established in 1989. We had an IPO at the London Stock Exchange. We export our products to 80 countries of the world, and we have more than 32,000 of employees in the company. That is a huge company contributing to food security and environment security. And when we hear this question, Ukraine is a raw material country because we export raw materials. I don't think it's correct, because we have many companies. At every stage, we add value and export products with high value added to compete in the foreign markets. And the fact that we export to more than 80 countries of the world, this testifies to the fact that we are competing for this market. Next slide, please. And we also are aware that more than 70% of CO2 emissions and global warming issues is the issue of using so-called dirty energy. We decided that we're not going that way. We're going the way of a green transformation. Next slide, please. Our key objective for us, this ambitious objective up to 2030 to become a carbon neutral company. This is a very challenging objective, but we believe we're capable of achieving that. The other objective important for us, in 2030, we want to be an energy independent company. That is all the energy resources necessary for our in-house production. We want to produce them in-house the company. The instruments we're using for that, in order to answer your question, to demonstrate that Ukraine has real potential chances to reach these ambitious objectives. First of all, this energy efficiency technologies, the modern technologies, substituting this dirty energy with renewable energy we have in large capacities, using circular economy models, which is in the basis of green transformation, of European green transformation, and also innovations. Next slide, please. In general, we should understand that renewable energy is more traditional than the one we take as a traditional one with fossil fuels, because traditionally both the wind, the sun and water, both in Europe and in Ukraine, used to be used as a clean energy resource. And to a large extent, we just want to come back to our roots, historic roots, and to the potential each country has, including Ukraine. Next slide, please. Energy efficiency. Unfortunately, historically, there's a legacy program. Is energy inefficiency of the Ukrainian economy, and we can compare all this, and this is automatically results in huge emissions which we have to cut, and then working on decreasing the energy consuming of our Ukrainian economy. We'll be, at the same time, we'll be working on cutting CO2 emissions. In my opinion, energy efficiency should be our national idea. And you can see that MHP, our company, holding in terms of energy efficiency ratio is among the best countries in terms of energy efficiency. At the same time, we have this huge resources we need to still make use. Next slide, please. This is a key element of our circular economy model as a biogas complex we built in Ukraine, in Ladizhin, in Dnipropetrovsk region, total capacity approximately 18.5 megawatts. We have another complex operating in Slovenia. Exactly this element provides us an opportunity to process all wastes into green, clean energy, which we use later on for producing our clean products. And organic products we have at output, we use it to return to the soil in order to renew the yields and productivity. Next slide, please. This is our circular economy model. Next slide, please. And a very important element of this is innovations. I believe that to resolve the issue of global warming, not using innovations for any sector, agriculture and chemistry, it's not possible. That's why we invest a lot in investments, in innovations. We believe that we need an absolutely different model and technologically different, and we cooperate with many companies, including DTAC company present here, and via mobilizing resources together with DTA to mobilize these resources, because we need to invest a lot in innovations. And in conclusion, I would like to wish all of us a great success in this, because the objectives we have as a MHP and for Ukraine very ambitious, and we need to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a follow-up question? It was mentioned earlier about part of building the resilience of the food system, the agricultural system, was thinking about shortening supply chains and eating more local produce. Is your vision for Ukrainian agriculture to be the breadbasket of Europe with its wheat production, or is it thinking about changing the agricultural system in the way that you've just been outlining and introducing a different form of agriculture?
Well,
first of all, we are resolving the issue of food security for Ukraine, and we put our contribution into resolving global issues. We believe that both the world and Ukraine are in need of new green economy model. And for that, we need to transform a lot, taking consideration that we're a vertically integrated company, taking into consideration that starting from tilling or soil, growing feed, all stages. We have many business stages. We need to modernize each stage. Each stage has to be ecologically, environmentally clean. We need to minimize the carbon footprint at each stage in order for all the business chain to be carbon zero, which is a huge task, but we are clearly understanding the task, the way we need to move forward. And naturally for that, we need the dialogue with the government. We need the support from the state, from the government, and we need more of that. But at least we're optimistic, we remain optimistic, and we move forward.
Very much indeed. Now, our final speaker this morning is my colleague, Anthony Froggatt, who is Deputy Director of the Environment and Society Programme and Senior Research Fellow. Anthony, I don't have a question for you, I don't think. Oh yes, sorry, is on the next page. From what you've heard today, because we've heard quite a lot across different areas about Ukraine's green transition, where do you think, as a kind of independent commentator, where do you think Ukraine gets it right, and what policy actions could have the most positive transformative effects? And are there any missing pieces in the puzzle? So over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for arranging this great event. I mean, it's
It's been a logistical challenge, starting at 9 o'clock on the first day of the COP, but I think it's really been worthwhile. So just wanted to, in some ways, summarize some of the issues that have been addressed today and add my comments to it. I mean, I think we all know the importance of Ukraine from an energy perspective, given its geographical significance and that it's a transit route for oil and gas to Western Europe. I think what's less well known is the importance of Ukraine in terms of agricultural products. And during the 2019-2020, Ukraine shipped 57 million tons of grain to international markets, representing about 16% of the global export. So it really is a huge producer to grain worldwide. Furthermore, in terms of its domestic importance, the agricultural share of export revenue increased from 26% in 2012 to 45% in 2020, amounting to $22 billion. But as with all countries, the impacts of climate change are being felt in Ukraine and particularly in the agricultural sector. Consequently, we're starting to see a fall in exports due to smaller harvests caused by severe drought conditions. By March 2020, grain exports were reportedly down 16% on the previous year. So we're starting to see the climate impacts in Ukraine in some ways in a more real and vicious way than in other parts of the world. Ukraine is also a significant producer and user of fossil fuels, and it extracted in 2018 14 million tons of oil equivalent of coal, 16 million tons of oil equivalent of gas, and 2.3 million tons of crude oil. It's also got a nuclear power program and a small but growing renewable energy industry. Ukraine also has significant fossil fuel reserves. It has the 7th largest reserves of coal in the world and the 2nd largest reserves of gas in Europe. So it has a significant interest in fossil fuels. Despite this, nearly a third of Ukraine's total energy demand is imported, which includes around 80% of oil consumption, a third of natural gas, and about 50% of coal. And Russia remains an important supplier of energy, either directly or indirectly, to Ukraine. In 2020, approximately 7.3% of Ukraine's only 7.3% of Ukraine's electricity was generated from new renewables, so around 12.5% if you include hydro, with the goal of, I believe it's 25% by 2035, but I heard something slightly different in the translation, so I hope that that's correct. But many studies show that this is a relatively modest target given the capacity and the resources that Ukraine has. The International Renewable Energy Agency estimates that onshore wind could be 320 gigawatts and solar 70 gigawatts by 2030. All of this based on competitive cost competitiveness, which is up from 6.5 gigawatts today. So really multiple folds increase in the deployment of renewables. And as we know, the deployment of renewables will simultaneously address energy security, economic competitive, and climate change. It really is the win-win-win-win solution. Similarly, as we've heard in terms of energy efficiency, due to the economy structure and building and industrial inefficiency, the country's energy efficiency is low, over twice the world average, and as was shown very clearly in the previous presentation. So absolutely at the forefront of the journey to the green transition must be energy efficiency. Furthermore, given the EU's clear drive to decarbonisation and the desire for greater coordination and cooperation between the EU and Ukraine, climate change is likely to be a cornerstone of the future relationship, which we've heard very clearly today. And it's maybe worth reflecting upon the EU-Ukraine's summit statement from last month, where it said, the EU side welcomed Ukraine's ambition to approximate its policies and regulations with the European Green New Deal. So the Green Deal in Europe being at the heart of Ukraine is again one of these key issues in terms of the roadmap for the energy transition. One of the other topics was mentioned was in relation to carbon pricing and the impact that has on fuel poverty. But we know that in Ukraine, the carbon price is remarkably low. As I saw it, it's about $0.3 a ton. I hope again with experts on the panel that this is correct. And if we compare that to Europe, where the price is around 60 euros a ton and the global price of around $3 a ton. So the Ukrainian price is around a tenth of the global average. Yeah, there's much work to be done. And I know that Ukraine is discussing the introduction of an emissions trading system with a legislative adoption, hopefully within the next couple of years. The introduction of a more reflective carbon price in Ukraine is important for the domestic decarbonization, as we've heard, but it will also be stimulated by the EU in terms of its proposals for the introduction of a carbon border tax adjustment mechanism. This mechanism is expected to enter into force in January of 2023, firstly with a transition period until 2026. So this will be the time in which importers don't have to buy credits, but they will be reviewed on a quarterly basis. So we will start to see the process being put in place with obligations for reporting. Now, CBAM is going to be introduced sector by sector, starting with cement, iron and steel, aluminium and fertilizers, and the electricity sector. Therefore, this is a particularly significant to manufacturers in Ukraine, as we've heard today.
Це дуже важливо для виробників. І останні дві моменти, які я хотів сказати. Перше, треба визначити, що ми побачили значні падіння СО2, які виробляються в Україні, з 720 мільйонів тонн до 2019 року. Значне падіння. Це не тому, що це просто чудова революція. 726 мільйонів до 231 мільйона. Це, звичайно, і декарбонізація, і економічна реструктуризація. Таким чином, що ми побачили, що 62% у викидів парникових газів 90-х років. Саме тому, що НВВ, який був поданий в 2016 році, він тільки мав 40% падіння порівняно з 90-ми роками на 2030 рік. Але, як ми чули, що Україна подала варіант НВВ інший, де є зобов'язання 65%, звичайно, у зниженні ПГ за певних умов, і також прагнення досягнення нульових викидів до 2060 року. Таким чином, підсумовуючи, хотів сказати, що Україна, звичайно, має складні і дуже значні виклики. Звичайно, ще має значні резерви, також викопних палив, а також економіку, інфраструктуру, які є досить неефективними. Звичайно, економіка, яка залежить на сільськогосподарських також експортів. Крім того, стратегічне рішення буде прив'язаним до Європейського Союзу, також прискорює декарбонізацію. Таким чином, хоча є певні протирічні виклики, для мене, я чудово розумію, що Україна прагне швидкої декарбонізації, а також збільшити енергетичну незалежність і економічну безпеку. Основа цього переходу, звичайно, буде енергетична ефективність, а також альтернативні джерела енергії. Однако, звичайно, треба мати міжнародну підтримку ЄС для того, щоб перейти до швидкого і справедливого переходу. І, звичайно, ми будемо говорити тут і про зменшення державних субсидій для викопних палив, а, звичайно, треба створювати прозорий та інклюзивний процес. Це не просто, але тільки коли ці всі питання можна розглядати разом у комплексі, цей процес буде сталим як соціально, так і екологічно. Дуже дякую, Ентоні. Хороший дуже огляд цих питань, які ми сьогодні обговорювали. Зараз у нас є період 40 хвилин для питань. Питання можуть задаватися як на місці, так і онлайн, в режимі онлайн. Я вже бачу одне питання в кімнаті. Давайте почнемо з цього, а після цього у нас будуть...
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mariana Banyarska. I represent Ukrainian. I I represent Ukrainian NGOs here, and I have, of course, a few comments and few questions. Ukrainian Climate Network also developed a position for this COP. I've got this document and I can share if anybody is interested. And my comments are the following. First of all, I want to emphasize that Ukrainian embassy is on reduction of overall emissions, but actually it allows the growth of emissions in industry and agricultural sector. So I would be interested in comment on that. And I have also the question, if Ukraine is aiming at, and maybe if Ukraine is going to set the target of reduction from coal industry, maybe in this forum too. And the second question is whether Ukraine has an intention to develop maybe extra mechanisms on using of the funds that are going to be spent on greenhouse gas emissions reductions, because we know that Ukraine has an experience of misuse of such environmental funds in the past. So whether there are some plans to develop more effective mechanisms of using environmental allocations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's ask those two questions around the decarbonisation to industry and agriculture, and then if I turn to you to talk about the green funds. So first question, Dmytro.
Yes, there is kind of answer to the first question, because to create something and to reduce something, you need to establish a national program, or at least sectoral program. And that's why I'm happy to present here what was created by our team, Ukrainian Business Trade Association team, what we call Ukrainian Food Transformation System, or Smart Green Deal for Ukrainian Agriculture, which is actually the number of steps which Ukraine, or at least agricultural sector, needs to undertake to reach its goal. It's already went through public talks. We already obtained positive answers from Minister of Agriculture, and exactly that's our desire, that all of other sectors will create the same programs for them, which will be totally collected to the national legislative base and to European, and that will lead us to the goal which we actually want to achieve, the decarbonization. But I think that on question number 2, better one of our ministers will answer.
Let me first answer, Alexandra.
I can say that, I can answer to that. When we talk about decarbonization, we have new challenges we didn't face before. For example, we now have to follow very deep diagnostics of CO2 emissions in agrarian sector in all the technological processes. And these audits we never conducted before. It's a new thing for us. And we have just had elements of that. And I would like to say that our company, MHP, has signed an agreement with LTEC, a British company, so that we conduct this diagnostics, conduct this audit, so that every agrarian technological process could be identified very clearly and analyzed for CO2 emissions. But at the same time, we have to understand what kind of tools, what kind of technological elements we have to use or change so that our traditional decisions could not lead to the new CO2 emissions. How can we lead the zero emissions? And of course, quite a lot of new challenges, and we have to work together with the government, with other ministries, otherwise we can't do it on our own. So yes, we are the leaders in trying to reach decarbonization, and we are happy to share this experience too.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Irina.
Yeah, thank you. I will comment also on the first question first and then on the second one. So we had really heated debates on the industry and agricultural sector emissions. And from the industry perspective, I think it's a fair solution because we understand that existing industry has really to decrease its emissions per unit of product they produce. But we also have to leave the space for the new industry to develop. And with the war, with all the declines that we had, we really want Ukraine to develop as an industrial country. In terms of agriculture, yes, indeed, there are certain technologies which have to be implemented by companies, and they're also helping to improve the resource efficiency of the activities. But I think the major issue in the agricultural sector is that we really have to put the question on decreasing of arable lands in Ukraine and transforming certain territories to nature ecosystems, and that requires completely new mechanisms. It's possible in procedure, but there has to be certain stimulation for that. And that's something that we have to develop, and that's something that can bring much more emission reductions. On the financial side, it's a complex of issues because whatever transformation you take, you have to find out what are the mechanisms which are best to deliver. It can be regulatory, it can be economic instruments which put in place, which enable the system. And then the last one is the co-financing or grant financing for the areas where you cannot deal just with the economic and regulatory instruments. Speaking about environmental funds that we have on the national level, that's not much funds also because the carbon taxes that we have are very low, the one which goes to the state. So if we are to develop certain financial programs to support decarbonization, and has to go together with increasing of the taxes so that everybody understands, okay, we increase the taxes, but we also develop certain programs which help to transform quicker. So that's the vision that we try to build on and try to implement.
Thank you very much. Moving to the online questions, I'm going to group two. One from Oksana Aliyeva. NDC prescribed greenhouse gas emissions decreases is foreseen most in the energy sector. Is there an intention to phase out coal and declare a date, perhaps at this COP, to join the coalition of other countries on ending coal power? And a question from Roland Smith. In the context of decarbonisation, is it possible to imagine Ukraine ending its dependence on natural gas imports from Russia? Who would like to? You.
So, as you know, the tech is quite significant player in coal in Ukraine. At the same time, we have quite clear vision and strategy regarding phase out of coal, at least as part of our company process. We are the first company who joined Powering Past Coal Alliance initiative, and I believe that this is first step, and the other companies should follow, including Ukraine as a state. And I hope that this announcement can be made very soon by Ukrainian government, because having such an important part of generation mix, Ukraine cannot avoid stating clear position about coal phase out. But it's quite an important topic for Ukraine from the side of energy security, because taking current situation, we have quite critical situation with coal stocks before winter season, and phasing out, as I already said, should be part of responsible process and social process in our country. That's why we are waiting for clear strategy and signals from the government how this process will be run on the future. But definitely our company being in this green transition, as I already said, moving from coal to renewables and to other technologies, definitely will lead this process in Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Anybody want to tackle the Russian gas imports?
I can continue.
Continue, Maxi.
Yes, because you know that we are the major private gas producer in the country. And for the last 5 years, we increased volume of production by more than 4 times. And I think it's another case where we lead by example. Ukraine have all grounds to be self-sufficient in gas supply. As you already mentioned, one of our speakers, we have the second largest reserve for gas in the country. Now the matter how we can convert this advantage into real life. And I already, as I mentioned, having such a huge increase of gas production, and for this year we'll have record 2 BCM of production by our company. We show everybody that they're realistic. We need professional people, we need investments, and we need technologies. All of these we can get, and I'm confident that subject to all these factors, Ukraine can be self-sufficient in gas production by 2030.
Okay, I will also add quickly. So from the recent information from the Ministry of Energy, they're working on the new energy strategy, and they want to build it based on the NDC and on the goals that we have also on decarbonization. They're not planning to build new coal facilities, as what they say and announce, and they're now calculating on the dates when Ukraine can actually phase out coal. On the gas issue, I think I want to anchor what Anthony was saying about energy efficiency, because that's the key issue. And Ukraine really has a huge potential in buildings, in municipalities, in many companies. But that's also not very easy to deliver due to historical ways how people live in houses. They have to organize a condominium, they have to take a loan. So these are all not only pure economic issues, which you can put a price and then people act. It's also, there are a lot of cultural and other issues which have to be taken into account.
So do you have a kind of mental time scale for dealing with the housing stock?
We are on that journey from 2013, and there were good programs set, simple programs to support energy efficiency in buildings and actually transform the societal approach, how you live in your house, in a multi-floor houses. And we continue with the Energy Efficiency Fund in cooperation with the EU, and Ukraine is adding the resources. It's not flying very quickly because the area is so complicated, but I believe we are on the right way. And we just have to spread to municipal and state buildings. We have to have programs for energy efficiency in municipal wastewater and heat systems, so that these all in combination can bring much more efficiency and reduction of consumption.
Thank you very much.
Just one example. If we will have energy efficiency like in Poland, for example, we can decrease energy consumption more than 2 times. And in this case, we will be not import country. We can export just some energy resource. It's key position for our country. It's energy efficiency. It's very, very important. I absolutely agree with Irina.
Thank you very much. Can we have the microphone down here? Oh, I was coming. Oh, Ludi, you're going to get a lot of exercise today. Anthony wants to comment.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, maybe just to emphasize this efficiency point, and I just wonder in terms of where we are, there's discussions in terms of energy transition. So we have the Powering Past Coal Alliance, we have support for electric vehicles, we have the financing issues, but everyone knows that for many parts of the world, it's energy efficiency. This is what we need to do in the next 9 years in order to meet the 2030 target. It has to be energy efficiency. So maybe Ukraine can launch a new initiative on global creating energy efficiency in order to meet the 2030 targets. Because it is, as you said, if only Ukraine moved to the Polish standard of efficiency, which isn't the highest in Europe, it would very easily meet its target. So it really is that. And how can we make energy efficiency more attractive internationally for the negotiators?
Thank you, Anthony. That's an important challenge, and thank you, Deputy Prime Minister.
No, indeed, thank you so much. You've mentioned a very important topic, and we've been just discussing this issue ahead of the recent EU-Ukraine summit, which has been held in Ukraine, in Kiev, and the President announced the global national program of energy efficiency and thermomodernization of private and public buildings, and we've agreed to launch another financial program for that, financed by European Union, and we hope that it will already be announced ahead of the upcoming Eastern Partnership Summit in December. This is a very important dimension, and I personally visited one of the very small cities, the auspices of the Odessa region, which is the sea region. It's called Ismail, and they have already severely invested in energy efficiency, and it brings a lot of resources back to the government. But I think if Ukraine is taking some leadership in something, is something that will be related to transfer of technologies, and agri-sector is where Ukraine has a proper expertise, proper capacity, proper amount of success stories, and this is part of Ukraine's file, which is undiscussable, and where we gain a strong authority among international partners. And this is where we have a good example when the businesses, based on its experience, produce the agenda, which let's say, facilitates the discussions we're having and having in Brussels. So, but when it comes to energy efficiency, financial cooperation, different initiatives like MESAN and etc., we're here already collaborating with our partners. We're contributing with our input. But when it comes to Ukraine, where Ukraine is standing as a leader and pioneer in some agenda, this would be the agri-sector so far.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question in here? Yes, and then we'll move back to the virtual audience.
Всім доброго дня. Мене звуть Брикалов Олександр, мер міста Мирноград.
I'm Alexander Brikalov. I'm the mayor of Mirograd in Donetsk region. Could you please tell us, in your opinion, the concept drafted by the government, to what extent it answers all the questions the municipalities are interested in? I mean, the terms of implementation for this concept. I mean also the register of coal mines and gradual closing down of coal mines, and whether there are programs developed to support cities and towns to be transformed. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Directed at the government. Who would like to take that one? Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister.
So I would suggest that we would have this discussion back in Kiev, you know, because we're both from Ukraine. But still, this is basically the substance of the discussion. We have that, yes, of course, we have the strategy and the vision, but now we have to understand how do we back it up with the finances. This is the logic the government is following, but when it comes to the regional leadership, so you're a mayor, as far as I understand, of one of the Ukrainian citizens. Based on the general line put on by the government, you should form your own strategies, and then when you identify the priority areas of the development of your region, then we will be able to identify the amount of resources and attention we should allocate to your region. Particularly, I can only name once again the region I've been just a week ago, where it is very easy to understand the strategy of its development, the priorities, the areas, and the areas to invest in. So that's why giving the answer to your question is that the general framework is there. The very particular framework should be formed by you for us to be able to support you. So, but there will be a number of sectoral strategies, like I said, there's the energy efficiency, when the government resources will be allocated to that, the international resources will be prioritized to that. So if there are areas of your region which you would put attention and focus on, that would be your priorities, which will be then supported by the government. But also the other priority is the just coal transition, and for those regions who will be subjected to this process, there will be a particular attention, of course, also.
Thank you very much, Olga. You're doing overtime today. We'll take a question from the online audience now, which is Andrei Andrusievich. Would the speakers comment on the EU proposal for Carbon and Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, both in the context of the EU-Ukraine relations and in a wider context of achieving Paris Agreement goals? So who would like to take a stab at answering a question about CBAMs?
I can start with and then maybe
Thank
somebody
you,
want
Irina.
to continue. We understand the nature of CBAM and why EU is introducing, because the certain types of industry has not been reducing emissions for many, many years. But we are also very much concerned how it will impact our economy. And of course, we are holding consultations with EU on basis that we have a EU association agreement, that we are part of the energy community, so that we have certain special approach and certain way how we as Ukraine deal with it. There is also a question on this mechanism that the carbon pricing has to be similar in other countries. You can do it effectively when you have emission trading system, but having it with the pricing of EU means that it's not possible to be implementable in such a short time. EU was going to that for 20 years. If you're talking about carbon pricing, it's not similar to what EU ETS is, because carbon pricing, it's kind of tax when you pay for every ton of emissions, while in EU ETS, it's flexible for certain sectors. So we are still to find our way, and we are still not fully understand how EU will formulate its approach and how national circumstances will be taken into account for different countries.
Thank you.
I will add, actually.
All right.
Possible, definitely. And I will continue what Madam Marina said already. But the question is, the CBAM for business for what? Actually, definitely, it's a biggest question of financing what will be inside Ukraine. But I think that my colleagues from business will vote for the question, why not to make CBAM on eastern border of Ukraine? Why should we do it on western border of Ukraine? And if European Union treating us like a neighbors, we have a associational agreement, that's what we discussed previously. Why not to establish enough programs to help Ukrainian business to make green transformation as soon as possible? That will solve all the issues. And actually, CBAM on the eastern border will help to find resources to make it not only on international money.
Thank you. Maxim.
Yes, I can, on behalf of industry, not only energy. So I wouldn't say that CBAM should be treated as a threat for Ukraine. I think that this discussion about CBAM should initiate our internal discussion. Either we good in our homework. So first, talking about industry, I think that carbon pricing coming to the levels of European Union is unavoidable in Ukraine. And what we have now from the industries and even from our sister company called Metinvest, which is one of the largest producer of steel in not only in the country, is that let's develop joint projects so that we have enough green energy for our own consumption. And this is how PPA, as a new tool to support development of renewables, can start developing in our country. So I think time will come when industries, industrial companies approach those who are in development of renewables and start signing long-term contract as a basis for financing this project. It's one example. The other example in the whole context of our conversation is about integration of Ukrainian energy system into INTSOE. And this is one of the most important strategic moves, not for our industry, but for the whole country. And I hope that government will do whatever is necessary that we, by 2024, will be part of INTSOE European energy system. And then and the next step will be market coupling. And if Ukraine is preparing to become part of European energy market, that we shouldn't afraid CBAM or any other things. We should implement emission trading system as it was already agreed, but we should have some transition. We cannot jump immediately from €1 to 60 euro payment per ton. And this is what should be respected from European part. But finally, if we talk about European integration, we see us as a part of European family, we all should be prepared to pay proper price for carbon and to be competitive working in European economy.
Thank you. Anthony.
Yes, sorry. Number of points. Firstly, I think we all recognize that there needs to be some, we need to pay the price of externalities in the goods that are produced. And carbon pricing is one mechanism to do that. It's not the only one, but in order there to be a faster transition, there needs to be a commercial price for the environmental damage that we do. I think secondly, it's important to recognize that there are lots of non-price barriers to stop the introduction of new technologies. So carbon pricing isn't the silver bullet that changes everything. It must be part of a package of other measures. I mean, again, we come back to the discussion on energy efficiency. We know it makes sense economically, but yeah, it doesn't happen. So there's a whole series of non-tariff barriers. The third point to recognize, which my colleague just mentioned, is it's a complicated and difficult process, and it may take some time to do. To give an example, Brexit. In the UK, we've left the EU emissions trading system, and we've now set up our own system, and we're still not linked back to the ETS. So there's technical issues, there's political issues. It is a complicated issue. My third point is there is a movement towards global carbon pricing, and I think we need to recognize that. And we can see that now around 20% of global carbon is priced in some way. And that is changed significantly in the last year because China has introduced an emissions trading system for the first time. And that is larger than the EU ETS. So, and it just covers the power sector. So it is a global trend and we're moving in that direction. There is a huge price differential, as I mentioned. So the global average price now is $3 a ton of carbon. And the EU ETS is 60. So we have to try to have some sort of harmonization, but it's not going to happen overnight with this huge differential that exists. But I do think the CBAM is an important process for carbon literacy. And this is exactly what we saw when we introduced the emissions trading system in the EU, when the UK was part of the EU back in 2005. It encouraged businesses or required businesses in a whole other sectors to start understand what carbon means and how carbon will affect their business. And I think CBAM will do that. It will help to drive carbon literacy in many countries that have resisted having these discussions. So in that way, I think it's really important. But it raises huge methodological questions, which need time to work through and understand. And I hope that's the rationale behind the transition period. There is an introductory period with the CBAM that will enable non-monetary exchange, but yet understanding how the system works and accounting in the right way. So I do hope that that period is taken seriously so that there's 2 or 3 years in which we can get this right. But I do recognize it's highly politically contentious. Ukraine is just one country that is has doubts about it, has concerns about it. China is others, US is others. So, but I think recognizing that there are concerns, but recognizing it is in the general good for there to be more carbon literacy around the world and to develop mechanisms to have externalities being paid, I think is a really important process.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Anybody else in the audience have a question? Can't see any hands. So moving down to the online questions again. Let's go to a question from Virginia Rigoni. In which industry and sector, to the panel, would you like to see more ambitious targets for 2030 to facilitate Ukraine's green transitions? And has your view and expectations on the balance of different sectors' decarbonisation plans changed in the last 3 to 5 years. So does anybody want to tackle that? Where are the sectors that could be more ambitious? Where are the sectors that are already being super ambitious? And how quickly is that changing?
I can start.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So when we started working on NDC, it was a process of modeling with times model and calculations on where the biggest potential lies and where the cheapest transformations could be. But when we took these numbers and went out to talk to ministries, to sectors, to businesses, it turned out that in certain areas, even when we see the big potential, it cannot happen quickly. So one of the sector is energy efficiency in buildings. And the model shows that economically, there's a huge potential and it really pays back. But when we look at the practical level of implementation and how difficult it is, we had to reduce the overall ambition for this sector. Another one, which is also not very easy, is the transport sector. I think it's difficult in many, many countries. And in Ukraine in particular, because the public transport is not, it's actually underinvested heavily. And in many cities, we have more and more cars. The railway is also underinvested and in a very bad situation. So the road transport takes over in the passenger transitions and in the freight transitions. So these are the areas where there has to be a much stronger combination of reforms and investments, which is Ukraine struggling to deliver. But also with stronger EU policies in the transport sector, we have more cars in Ukraine, second-used cars, and very difficult debates in the parliament. So from environmental perspective, we as a ministry, of course, are not in favor of letting these cars in without any major payments for environmental pollution. But people want to have better lives, more decent lives. They want to get this quality. Yeah, that's a very complicated task. And I think for the next 10 years, it will not get easier because EU will transfer quicker to electric cars, where all these diesel cars will be transferred to countries like Ukraine.
Thank you. Maxime.
So talking about promising industries or technologies, I would like to touch two topics. Through all the discussion, it was quite important topic as financing, where we can get financing. So we should build partnership and should be build this partnership not only business corporate level, but all on the country level. And I think that today we have a lot of opportunities, and one of these is hydrogen. You know that Ukraine is part of European hydrogen strategy and 240 gigawatt initiatives, which saying that Ukraine and North Africa are the major non-EU partners in hydrogen development. And I think that this is very important strategic signal and opportunity for us to develop this industry. But and Germany is one of the major partners in developing hydrogen in Ukraine, taking into account all our positive factors in renewable development and this industry. But as you know, all projects all around the world producing hydrogen is not economically viable without state support. And I hope that our government, working with European Union and with Germany, can develop this the way of financial support to corporates in Ukraine to make this to make the technology work. The other technology, which is also interesting for us to think about, is small modular reactors. I have just recently had serious meetings in the United States, and the United States can become our partner in developing this technology as a next step for nuclear development in our country. I think that nuclear technology should be part of discussion during this venue, because it's quite contradictional approach to future of nuclear as part of green transition. And I think that's another example where the industry can be promising, and Ukraine can be having more than 55% of nuclear in our generation mix, can bring new life, developing small modular reactors is part of our transition.
Thank you very much. Any, do you want to?
In my opinion, many national industries have a lot of challenges for green transition, specific challenges, yes? And also we have to understand then that green transition for Ukraine especially, it's very important because just to figures, for last 30 years of independence, yeah, we spent from state for import, for example, natural gas, more than $100 billion. For second one is for 30 years, Ukrainian independence, we spent more than $400,000 for total import energy resources to Ukraine. It's almost 3 gross domestic products which we have today. It's a lot of spend for any country. And one way and one strategic result, it's green transformation. It's my opinion.
Thank you very much. We are coming towards the end of time, so I'm going to give each one of the speakers. Is it a quick question? All right, this will be the last question, and just a warning, I'll give each of the speakers a minute or probably 30 seconds after this question to sum up. So if you've got a particular person in mind, please say.
My name is Natalia Kachkovska. I am the MP of Ukraine, and I also the founder of the Ukrainian Foundation of Sustainable Development. I want to thank you so much for this incredible discussion within the framework of COP. That's very useful. My question is for the representative of the government, because we had the discussion here concerning the decarbonization of various sectors of economy, but there was no communication of the financial system and the banks. At the moment, IFIs, the banks, the hedge funds are all declaring about a certain strategy on decarbonization, which means that they are reducing in their portfolios the number of companies which are investing into fossil fuels or the industry but are not viable. Are any of these banks working with are you working the government with the Ukrainian banks in this field? Are you setting the targets, obligatory or not obligatory targets concerning decarbonization? Because that is a direct influence to indeed the development of Ukraine. Thank you very much. It's a huge subject.
So indeed, the finance issue is extremely important. And with implementation of NDC already, we started to work on financial strategy, how we implement it. And this work is now being conducted to put all the necessary elements of such a strategy. It has to be reform of the budgeting system. So we have certain green tagging and understanding how the budget planning on the national and local level includes needs for green transition. It has to be with strategy, how we work with international financial institutions, with international mechanisms like Article 6 and the Paris Agreement and all other opportunities. It has to be work done in introduction of Ukraine, certain Ukrainian green taxonomy and opportunities for green bonds. And of course, engagement of state banks and private companies to develop and use this mechanism. The mechanisms there are huge and a lot of them. There are a lot of private funds which are seeking for projects on green transition. So the task of the government is to have the specific work plan, how we're gonna deliver it for Ukraine. Of course, it all goes in line with overall investment climate in Ukraine and all the protection of investors. So if you want them to come to Ukraine, we also have to ensure that it's safe and they are protected and it's possible to deliver projects in Ukraine. So it's up to deliver, and we invite everybody to be part of this governmental task in Ukraine, to engage, to provide comments, to have the really right strategy to make it happen.
Thank you very much. And now we've only got 2 minutes left. So 30 seconds per person for any closing comment or remark. So Irina, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, I think that green transition and European integration are really issues that can boost Ukrainian economy if you find all the compromises and if we really implement the necessary reforms, of course, with cooperation on finance and seeking all the opportunities. I don't see any other way for Ukrainian economy to develop rather than through the green transition agenda.
Thank you very much. Dmitry.
Well, green transition is our future, so business is ready to support this government in this decarbonization way.
Thank you. Maxime.
Just stress it again, today we have unique opportunity to become among leaders of decarbonization as a power industry, as a country. And I hope that we will not miss this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
In my opinion, we need move very fast, supporting each other, because we have not many times.
Anthony, final word.
Yes, I shouldn't really have the final word, but maybe just adaptation. I mean, the World Meteorological Organization published its State of the World report today. 7 of the warmest years on record have been in the last 7 years. And we're now looking forward to, or looking at, potentially much larger rises in emissions. So we will have to adapt as well as mitigate. So I would suggest that that is one of the areas that we all need to be looking at.
Right, well, final closing remarks from me. Thanks very much to our speakers in the first panel and our speakers today. Thanks very much to the audience. Thanks very much to the people who have helped put this together, DTEC and UBTA and the embassy, as well as partners behind the scenes. Thanks very much to the AV team for coping with an evolving IT infrastructure minute by minute as we went through the early part of the morning. Thanks to the online audience. Sorry for not being able to ask all of the questions that were submitted. And thanks indeed to everybody, and good luck with COP. And let's hope there is significant ambition found and that we don't end up in the situation that some are forecasting. Thanks very much indeed.